Welcome. I am representing Amsterdam Corporate Advisory, AMS Advisory. At AMS, we are corporate advisors and forensic analysts. We are not clinical psychiatrists, nor are we behavioral therapists, but we are experts in corporate behavior, business architecture, and data. And when you look closely at the outcome data behind modern digital gambling products, and in our opinion, you find a story that behavioral models have completely missed. Today, we are presenting a forensic product safety framework that shifts the question of gambling harm from who is playing to what is being built and what products are gamblers exposed to. This is the corporate analysis of algorithmically conditioned harm. Let us begin with the core architecture. Modern digital gambling is not a game of pure chance, nor is it a passive entertainment product. It is an active, closed-loop algorithmic system. Every interaction, every tap, every stake size, every timing delay is ingested in real time. The system analyzes this data to build live risk profiles and deploy personalized, sub-second incentives. What looks like an individual choice is actually the behavioral outcome of a highly sophisticated, real-time feedback loop. Our core insight is straightforward. Algorithmic conditioning systematically exploits human behavioral vulnerabilities. For regulators and legal advisors, this means we must stop looking solely at player behavior and start scrutinizing the system design. For decades, the global conversation around gambling harm has been dominated by what we call the addiction-only model. This model assumes the problem is a chronic individual pathology, an internal defect in the player's self-control. While clinical addiction is real, as a regulatory tool, this model is incomplete. It fails to explain why players with zero history of addictive behavior experience sudden, acute psychological collapse when exposed to high-intensity digital platforms. It also fails to explain why so many people recover rapidly the moment the environmental exposure stops. AMS Advisory is proposing a paradigm shift, the algorithmic trauma model. We argue that a substantial portion of gambling harm is not a pre-existing disease but an induced stress trauma response. The focus must shift from the player's capacity to resist to product safety and the operator's algorithmic design. To understand why this shift is necessary, we must look at the statistical anomalies. Data from the Australian Twin Registry reveals a striking fact. 82% of individuals who recover from pathological gambling do so through natural recovery, completely without formal clinical treatment or therapy. In any other major clinical addiction, such as severe substance abuse, a spontaneous recovery rate of 82% without medical intervention is virtually unheard of. Furthermore, the vast majority of people experiencing acute gambling harm are never formally diagnosed with a chronic disorder. The data tells us that this condition is highly environment dependent. When you remove the player from the engineered digital environment, the harmful behavior stops. This isn't the profile of a permanent internal pathology, it is the profile of an external, product-induced state. Let us look at how these two models compare side by side. Under the traditional addiction model, we talk about an internal disorder and a craving for gambling. Under our forensic conditioning model, we identify an external conditioning environment and a manufactured belief in recovery driven by algorithmic reinforcement. In the addiction model, the player's internal monologue is believed to be, "I need to gamble due to compulsion." But the data reveals a different reality. The player's cognitive state is actually, "I cannot keep losing. The next outcome should correct this." This is not a search for pleasure or a simple loss of control. It is an expectancy distortion. The player is trapped inside a highly optimized, artificial decision loop engineered by product architecture. This is our master framework, the 5-stage taxonomy of algorithmically conditioned harm. It maps the transition from a pure product design to an acute psychological injury. It starts with stage 1, the engineered loss cycle, where structural design dictates outcome sequencing. This triggers stage 2, algorithmic conditioning, where the system builds an artificial drive to restore financial balance. This drives the player into stage 3, damage repair behavior, a logical, desperate attempt to fix the financial and social damage. When those attempts are systematically crushed by the algorithm, the player enters stage 4, induced stress trauma, experiencing acute panic and dissociation. Finally, in stage 5, the system deploys addiction reframing, using the industry's own safety narratives to blame the player, thereby insulating the algorithm from liability. Let's examine each of these stages forensically. Stage 1 is the foundation of the trap, the engineered loss cycle. It begins with outcome sequencing, the manipulation of wins and losses to create perceived statistical anomalies that entice the player. This is supported by near-recovery conditioning, the delivery of near misses and partial wins that trick the brain into thinking a full recovery is imminent. But the most critical mechanism is proportional bankroll depletion. High-intensity algorithms do not extract wealth randomly. They are designed to normalize extraction patterns mathematically to match the individual player's specific financial capacity. The system tracks speed, transaction frequency, and balance size to drain the player's bankroll systematically. This damage is not a random byproduct of bad luck. It is mathematically structured and engineered. Once the loss cycle is engineered, the player enters Stage 2, conditioned compulsion. This is a 4-step loop. After the initial exposure, the player is hit with an unnatural, intense loss and shock phase. This creates severe cognitive conflict. The player's brain screams, "This cannot keep happening. The odds say I am due for a win." To resolve this engineered contradiction, the player is driven into conditioned recovery pursuit. The player returns to the game, not seeking entertainment or pleasure, but because the system has conditioned them to believe that recovery is imminent. In this state, gambling is merely the delivery mechanism. The true dependency is on the conditioned recovery loop itself. This brings us to Stage 3, damage repair behavior. This is the most misunderstood phase of gambling harm. When a player loses significant sums, they enter a state of severe crisis. They are not chasing a high, they are desperately trying to execute, quote, repair. First, they attempt financial repair, trying to win back what was lost to pay bills or secure assets. When that fails, they slide to psychological repair, continued play to resolve the mounting panic and cognitive dissonance. This leads to reputational repair, taking extreme measures, such as borrowing from family or seeking counseling, to hide the financial ruin and reduce social blame. Finally, they arrive at identity repair, internalizing the idea that they are broken, accepting the label of addict as the only logical explanation for their behavior. The player's actions are not irrational. They are executing a logical, deeply human attempt to repair cascading harm, an attempt that the algorithm is actively exploiting. When these repair attempts fail, the player enters Stage 4, induced stress trauma. This is where the product-induced harm manifests as clinical injury. Immediately following an engineered financial collapse, the player experiences an acute trauma reaction, characterized by profound shock, cognitive dissonance, and an intense threat response. If exposure continues or the damage is severe, this develops over the first month into acute stress disorder, involving hypervigilance, intrusive replaying of the event, dissociation, and sleep disruption. Left unaddressed, this solidifies into post-traumatic stress disorder, a long-term functional impairment. This is not a slow chronic addiction. It is an acute psychological injury caused by high-intensity product exposure. To assess this solely as an addictive disorder is to mask the actual trauma inflicted by the system design. How has this system operated in plain sight for so long? Stage 5 explains. System protection and the shield of shame. This system is designed to protect itself. When a player suffers catastrophic harm, the operator's public relations and responsible gambling programs shift the blame. They frame the issue as an individual loss of control, the victim-blaming structure. The player, overwhelmed by severe shame and panic, internalizes this blame. They accept the addict identity and retreat into silence. This silence of shame acts as a protective shield. It isolates the victim, prevents legal recourse, and completely hides the structural architecture of the game. The algorithm remains protected from regulatory scrutiny behind a barrier of manufactured self-blame. This analysis leads to profound legal and regulatory implications. The traditional regulatory question is obsolete. Did this player have a pre-existing gambling disorder? This question focuses entirely on the victim and shields the operator from accountability. The forensic inquiry must be, did the algorithmic system create, intensify, or exploit a conditioned state of impaired decision-making? This reframes the legal burden across 4 core pillars. First, product safety, scrutinizing game design and outcome sequencing. Second, unfair commercial practices, auditing behavioral targeting and intermittent conditioning. Third, vulnerability exploitation, tracing proportional depletion. And fourth, duty of care, holding operators liable for algorithmically conditioned compulsion. The operator has a duty of care to ensure their product does not systematically induce psychological trauma. To operationalize this paradigm shift, AMS Advisory outlines 3 strategic recommendations for regulators, legal advisors, and policymakers. First, we must broaden clinical assessment. We must evaluate acute stress, trauma symptoms, and financial threat alongside traditional addiction metrics. Second, we must audit algorithmic architecture. Regulators must mandate independent, structural reviews of outcome sequencing, speed of play environments, and real-time behavioral targeting. And third, we must reframe the legal burden. Legal frameworks must shift their focus from the player's capacity to stop to the operator's intentional design to exploit damage repair behavior. The traditional model asks why the player could not stop. The forensic model asks, what damage was the player trying to repair, and how did the system exploit that attempt? Let us lay our forensic thesis bare on the table. At AMS Advisory, we look at design architecture to find the root cause of systemic failure. And our thesis is this. For a vast portion of harmed players, what we call addiction is not the source of the problem. It is merely the visible catastrophic symptom. The true, underlying mechanism is product-based conditioning. It is a highly engineered, real-time feedback loop designed to induce loss chasing, capture the user's cognitive faculties, and inflict psychological trauma. To put it in the starkest terms for regulators, boards, and legal advisors, the player is not a pathologically defective addict. They are a human being trapped inside an algorithmic environment engineered to condition them to chase recovery. Once you shift your gaze to the architecture of the trap, the path to systemic liability and regulatory intervention becomes undeniable. At AMS Advisory, our corporate analysis leads to one clear conclusion. The current regulatory model is treating a product safety crisis as if it were an individual healthcare crisis. When a bridge collapses, we do not ask if the drivers had a pre-existing fear of heights. We audit the engineering of the bridge. It is time to apply that same level of commercial rigor, data analysis, and legal responsibility to digital gambling. The data tells a clear story. The architecture of harm is real, and it is structurally engineered. We must hold the platforms accountable. Thank you for your time. If you require further strategic analysis or assistance with algorithmic audits, please contact us at AMS Advisory.